Good evening, everyone. Welcome to you, our guests, in this scientific electronic symposium entitled Feminism in American and English Literature, held by the Department of English, College of Arts, University of Mosul, under the patronage of the President of the University of Mosul, Professor Dr. Qusay Kamaluddin Al-Ahmadi, and under the supervision of the Dean of the College of Arts, Dr. Muhammad Ali Muhammad, along with the department's head professor, Dr. Baqsm Yahya Jassim. Many thanks for all of them. My name is Huda Al-Hassani, a lecturer in contemporary English literature and literary criticism. My major research interest is in writing about popular fiction and genres, film studies, along with post-colonial studies. I have 2 conferences participations in post-colonialism and 1 workshop in Orientalism. Nowadays, I teach the English poetry, drama, and novel subjects at the Department of English, and in addition of being the moderator of this symposium, I will present to you an introduction to the topic entitled Feminism in Literature, History, and Theory. In my presentation, I am going to both tackle the historical development of feminism and introduce the major theoretical concepts. So I'd be so grateful if you switch off your mics during the presentations, and if you have any questions, you can ask at the end of this event. Thank you. Now, let me start my presentation. I will share my screen too. Well, my presentation is about feminism in literature, history, and theory. In this presentation, I will talk about feminism. So it will cover an introduction of what feminism is, its origin, history and waves, feminist theory, definition, aims and themes, Lewis Tyson and her critical theory today, and I will conclude with the main premises of feminist literary criticism. Well, in regard to feminism, I will start with its definition, and then I will talk about its origin, history, and waves. So, what is feminism? Generally speaking, feminism is a collection of movements and ideologies aimed at defining, establishing, and defending equal political, economic, and social rights for women. This includes seeking to establish equal opportunities for women in education and employment. So what about its origin? Actually, in 1837, Charles Fourier, a utopian socialist and French philosopher, is credited with having coined the word feminism in 1837. On the other hand, the words feminism or feminism and feminist or feminist first appeared in both France and Netherlands in 1872, in Great Britain in 1890s, and in the United States in 1910. On the other hand, while the word feminism had appeared in the Oxford English Dictionary in 1852, the word feminist appeared in 1895. Well, in order to trace the history of feminism, feminists and scholars have divided the movement's history into 4 main waves. The first wave, between late 70s and early 90s, it comprised women's suffrage movements of the 19th and early 20th centuries, promoting women's right to vote. Major writers like Mary Wollstonecraft's A Vindication of the Right of Women in 1792. The second wave, between early 1960s and late 1970s, it actually represents the women's liberation movement that began in the 1960s and campaigned for legal and social equality for women. Major writers like Simone de Beauvoir, The Second Sex, 1949, Betty Friedan's The Feminist in 1963, Kate Millett's Sexual Politics in 1970, and Ellen Schwalter's A Literature of Their Own in 1977. The third wave, however, came in the early 1990s. It resists the perceived essentialist ideologies and a white heterosexual middle class focus of second wave feminism. Third wave feminism borrows from post-structural and contemporary gender and race theories to expand on marginalized population experiences. Major writers like Alice Walker's In Search of Our Mother's Garden in 1983 and Bell Hook's Feminist Theory from Margin to Center in 1984. The fourth wave, on the other hand, came from around 2012, thereby it used social media to combat sexual harassment, violence against women, and rape culture. It is best known for the Me Too movement. Major writers like Kira Cochran's All the Rebel Women, The Rise of the Fourth Wave of Feminism in 2013. There is one more important term in feminism called post-feminism, appeared since 1980s. As a matter of fact, this term is used to describe a range of viewpoints reacting to feminism or as a backlash against feminism. While not being anti-feminist, post-feminists believe that women have achieved second-wave goals while being critical of third and fourth-wave feminist goals. Major writers like Judith Butler's Gender Trouble 1990 and Gender as Performance, an interview with Judith Butler in 1994. Actually, during all these waves, important movements and many other movements and ideologies appeared, like liberal feminism, radical feminism, materialist ideologies, along with many other modern feminisms like ecofeminisms, transgender people, Black and post-colonial ideologies, social constructionist ideologies, and cultural movements. Eventually, all these movements and ideologies had found their ways to the theatrical and philosophical field. Thereby, feminist theory appeared. So what is feminist theory and what are its main aims and themes? Feminist theory is the extension of feminism into theatrical or philosophical fields. It encompasses work in a variety of disciplines, including anthropology, sociology, economics, women's studies, literary criticism, art history, psychoanalysis, and philosophy. However, our interest today is in literary criticism. Nevertheless, the important question here is that, how does feminist theory work in the field of literary criticism? In order to answer this question, we first should know about the main aims and themes of feminist theory. So, on one hand, feminist theory aims to understand gender inequality and focuses on gender politics, power relations, and sexuality. And while providing a critique of these social and political relations, much of feminist theory also focuses on the promotion of women's rights and interests. On the other hand, many themes explored in feminist theory to include discrimination, stereotyping, objectification, especially sexual objectification, oppression, and patriarchy. In the end, all these aims and themes had been used in literary criticism field in order to challenge the oppression of, and thus the term feminist literary criticism appeared. So what is feminist literary criticism, and what are its main premises? Well, in her critical theory today, Lewis Tyson broadly defined feminist literary criticism as an approach to literature which examines the ways in which literature and other cultural productions reinforce or undermine the economic, political, social, and psychological oppression of women. This school of theory actually looks at how aspects of our culture are inherently patriarchal, male-dominated, and aims to expose misogyny writing about women, which can take explicit and implicit forms. In conclusion, after all, the main premises of feminist literary criticism will be: number one, patriarchal ideology, including patriarchal women. Number two, women as other. Number three, sex and gender. Number four, gender issues in literature. Number five, feminist activism. Number six, biological essentialism, along with number seven, logocentrism and symbols of male dominance. All these premises and more will be deeply explored and applied by my colleagues through different literary works from different genres, like drama, novel, and poetry. That was the end of my presentation. For further reading, you can refer to these resources. Thank you very much for your listening. Now, after giving an introduction to feminism, it is the time to explore and apply its premises in drama. Therefore, it is my pleasure to introduce my colleague, Mr. Qutayba Shihab Ahmed. It's wonderful to have you here, Mr. Qutayba. Mr. Qutayba is an assistant professor in English literature and drama. He teaches drama in both the MA and the undergraduate courses, along with literary criticism subjects for the undergraduate students too, at our department. His major interest is the English drama, mainly the Elizabethan drama. Yet, today he will present to you feminism in drama, and his presentation will show how feminism used in both the Elizabethan drama through Shakespeare's Macbeth and the modern drama through Henry Ibsen's A Doll's House. The floor is yours, Mr. Qutayba. You can start your presentation.
Thank you very much, Tutuda. You have given a very nice introduction. And now it's my turn. Thanks for the people there. It's my turn to explain how now this theme of feminism, or this branch of feminism, is applied in drama. As you know, I'm going to present the idea of feminism in English drama through two different periods. Number one, during the Elizabethan time and modern time. In the during the Elizabethan time, we'll talk about one of the most important dramatists, who is considered as the father of English drama at that time, William Shakespeare. And we'll see how Shakespeare is actually, or was capable of embodying this theme of feminism in his works, especially his Macbeth and King Lear. When we move to the modern time, I will give Ibsen, as also is called the father of English modern drama, and I will talk about one of his most important plays, A Doll's House, to serve as a modern drama in which feminism is clearly noticed. Going back to Shakespeare, or Shakespeare time, if we look to, or if we examine the plays presented by or written by Shakespeare, we recognize that Shakespeare portrays two kinds of women through his plays. Number one, women who refuses to submit to men and demand equal rights, and the other type of women, those women who are submissive women who carry out the rule on an Elizabethan as Elizabethan women. Shakespeare, actually, he was a writer who identified feminism in his works before the notion of feminism emerged in Europe. First of all, we will have Shakespeare's Lady Macbeth as a good example in which the idea of feminism clearly found, as I have just mentioned. Lady Macbeth as a play, I'm not going to take, because this actually takes a very long time, but I'll try to focus on the most important points. Lady Macbeth, she is already plotting Duncan murder, and she is stronger, more ambitious than her husband. She always pushes Macbeth into committing murder. She wishes that she were not a woman, that she could do it herself. This theme of relationship between gender and power is a key to Lady Macbeth character. Her husband, Macbeth, the prince, or he says, her husband says, she is a masculine soul inhabiting a female body. In other words, to say, instead of saying that she is a woman, she is a man rather than a woman, by saying she is a masculine soul inhabiting a female body. Women in the play implies can be as ambitious and cruel as man, yet social constraints deny them. Lady Macbeth in this play is actually, she is, as one of the critics describes it, as a vehicle in the play. She is the main power who always wants to prove herself as a Lady Macbeth. In other words, she is after the queen title. She wants to be the queen, and for Macbeth, her husband, to be the king. Shakespeare, in doing so, actually by using a very powerful woman, he is presenting, or he is whether he consciously or unconsciously, he is involving himself to use this theme of feminism in this play. Another thing which is very important with Lady Macbeth, that Lady Macbeth, she always encouraged her husband to achieve the goal, or to achieve the act of murdering Duncan the king, and then to be the king himself. Shakespeare at that time, one of the critics, he says that at that time Shakespeare, he was fond of giving us characters in his plays in acting. For example, when it is difficult to find ladies to play the act of the character in the plays, he used to do what? He used to manipulate or give boys to disguise as ladies in order to achieve that act, or to have that part in the play. This is the critics. They say that it might be Shakespeare from that time. He is enchanted by the idea of using or giving female characters on a stage, which is actually at that time, or the time of Shakespeare, which it was rare case, or a case which was not familiar at that time. Now we move to another play by Shakespeare, which is considered as a masterpiece of Shakespeare, which is King Lear. In King Lear, also Shakespeare, he uses the women or women characters, or he depends on women characters heavily, especially when he gives us the type of, or when he gives us the character of Goneril, Regan, and Cordelia. These are the three daughters of King Lear. Okay, now the question is, What is the problem with King Lear? King Lear, he was the king of the great England, and everything was settled. Everything was quite he was quite happy. Everything was quite smooth. So he created a problem for himself, and that problem was what? A decision, and that decision based on a naive scale, and that was based on a question. What was the question? The question is how much each of his daughters loved the father, King Lear. So after he wanted to retire, he decided to divide his kingdom between his 3 daughters. The scale of this decision was based on a very naive question. He asked each of his daughters, how much do you love your father? Gondren and Regan, she replies, or she gives a very satisfying answer to their father by saying, we love you more than everything in our life. So he said, okay, you are granted, each of you is going to be granted 1/3 of England. When he came to the third one, and here actually lies the problem, which he created for himself, he came to the youngest daughter. He asked her the same question by asking Cordelia, Cordelia, how much do you love your father? And he was expecting the same answer, but he was astonished when Cordelia, she replies, she says, look, father, I love your majesty according to my bond, no more, no less. And at that time, King Lear, he was not satisfied by this answer, and he was so angry. And what did he do? He deprived her of the 1/3 part of England. Now, actually, the idea or the effect of feminism, Shakespeare, by doing so, or by using Cordelia, who rejected her father's rules or constructions, by doing so, Cordelia proves her individuality, and individuality is one part of feminism. Feminism focuses on the freedom and individuality of the characters, whether they are in literature or in society. She rejects the power men hold over women, and Cordelia does emancipate herself from traditional rules of women. From beginning to end, Cordelia opposes her father's tradition. Indeed, this action actually reminds us of another play by Shakespeare, which is Romeo and Juliet, and we'll see that also Juliet in Romeo and Juliet also gives us this type of lady, in which we have a very unusual in a culture that expect women, especially young daughters, to be controlled by men. Now, some critics feel that Shakespeare is espousing feminism by presenting these 2 strong women. I mean, Cordelia and Juliet. Tries to portray women as bold, independent, and not submissive to the behavior of men of those days. And this theme actually now we found it nowadays in under the type of, or under the definition of feminism. To conclude with Shakespeare, I mean, not to talk too much about Shakespeare. To conclude, talking about Shakespeare's plays, one can safely say that this analysis, or the analysis, or doing how we study Shakespeare, is done in the light of feminist theories and deconstructive approaches. Feminism is just an idea. Actually, it is, though it is a theory, but at that time of Shakespeare, it was not so. I mean, feminism, it's not like feminism today. The feminism which is Shakespeare or those people at that time, it is not like the feminism which is nowadays in our modern time. So feminism is just an idea developed just because the word itself didn't exist during Shakespeare. That does not mean there were not strong women before. Shakespeare believed in an idea akin to modern day, which is feminism. So he believed in an idea which is actually similar, or actually it is nowadays it is called feminism, or feminism theory. Feminism at that time, during the Elizabethan time, also can be found in other dramatists, Elizabethan dramatists. For example, this theme of feminism is found also in John Webster in his plays. We can find this theme of feminism in Ben Jonson also. So at that time, feminism, the theme of feminism is familiar during Shakespeare time. Okay, now we're talking about feminism in Elizabethan time or in old time. Now we move to feminism, how feminism is used in modern time, in modern drama. And in modern drama, under this title, modern drama, I will have one of the famous dramatists who is considered as the father of modern and great supporters of women, mainly, or we will talk about Henrik Ibsen. And of course, we are going to take one of his famous or great plays, which is, I suppose that most of you know this play, it's called A Doll's House. A Doll's House. Just to begin with, we can say that feminism as literary theory, actually, as Situda said at the beginning, in the 19th century or late 18th century, side by side with socialism, because we have social problems associated with the appearance of feminism. Henrik Ibsen is considered as one of the central voices for feminism. His words, and he focuses on these two words very much. He says equal rights. What does that mean? That means that Henrik Ibsen is after these words, and equal rights, they were found everywhere at modern. Critics, they say that Ibsen's support of the feminist women movement and ideology becomes evident not only through the character and subject matter of plays, but also through his engagement in women cause, whether he admit that or not. Ibsen was described as a dedicated feminist. He was, some of the critics, they described Ibsen as a dedicated feminist. In Ibsen's plays, one can find plenty of feminist tendencies. Now we come to his play, A Doll's House. Feminism is quite, when we are talking about, we are after this word, which is feminism. Feminism is quite clear in this play, because, in the A Doll's House, A Doll's House is not only one of Ibsen's famous plays, but also a great contribution to feminist literature. A Doll's House is a conflict between masculine and feminine. So what do we have here? We have two things. We have, in A Doll's House, we have a conflict which is represent a conflict between masculine and feminine. So Ibsen in this play, he expand the outlook on the woman position whose individuality and freedom are taken by masculine. And this is actually the ladies or feminists, they say that their freedom and they are taken by masculine or actually male, they are governing everything. So in this play, he is considered with the problem of women's position in society, in a society which is controlled by men's rule, this is how women should try to get their rights. That means their rights, they're there. So women, they are struggling, they are fighting to get their right from men. Ibsen used two different couples in his play. I mean, in this The Dull House, Ibsen used two different couples in his plays to show how the fate of a marriage based on the quality of both spouses differentiate from that one based on the dominance of the husband and the suppression of the wife. Okay, now we come to the most important character in the Doll's House, which is the heroine, and this is actually her name, this character named Noura. I'm not mentioning the story of Noura because it is a very long story. She was forced to take a loan from someone, and that one is going to abuse her or to use her. Anyway, there is a problem with Noura and her husband. Noura in the Doll's House, as a woman or a wife and a mother, behaves like a doll. She is under the control of the invisible society, which is unfair and under male-dominated power. At the very end, I mean, after a long time, came to an end. At the very end of the action of Noura, she leaves her house by slamming off a door to the world of new possibilities, as if she closed a door, her own door, that door in which she was sharing her husband and children, and she moved into another world in which she is going to know her own responsibilities towards herself. This kind of self-realization, which usually leads to a new beginning, is one of Ibsen's main ideology posed in his plays. So Noura, in doing so, she sees that her individuality and freedom have been taken in living with Thorvald Helmet. And Helmet, he is the husband, her husband. This is the name of her husband. Now, Helmet has controlled Noura by power. So what did she do? She rejected it. She rejected to be a slave to her husband. She rejected to be a doll. She rejected to be a toy in that house. So she discovered, this is at the very end, she discovered painfully that she has been treated as a nullity, and this must be changed. And this, she decided that she must change this life or change this treatment by leaving the house and to seek a new life. Noura resists and rejects the domestic rule and act in opposition to the social conventions and morals and morals. So the problem in the play is about women's rights and the human rights, and the problem is there actually. It is about women's rights as human rights. When Noura closes the door, and this is very a beautiful sentence, which is used by so many critics. They say, when Noura closed the door on her husband and children, she opens the way to turn of the century women's movement. That means she began to live a new life in which she can find herself very clearly. So it is about the need for every woman to find herself, as if this is an invitation made by Noura, or declaration by Noura, for every woman to find herself, to recognize the truth about herself, her life, and her society. So believes that there is in somewhere, this is the belief by Ibsen. He protested against the position of women, their rights, and their being neglected in society. Okay, now we can hear concerning the feminism movement. We can add that the feminist movement, led by also, because we know that one of the major characters or major writers, Virginia Woolf. Virginia Woolf also, she talked about feminism. She said that, I mean, in modern times, that it is men who define everything. That means it is men who controls everything in society. It is men who has treated women as inferiors for many years. So now, as being a feminist or as following the feminism theory, now it is time for women to take their rights. This is what is all in English drama. But I think here I am obliged to mention one thing about how the word feminism is mentioned in or tackled in American drama. Or feminism in the United States actually refers to the collection of movements and ideologies aimed at defending and establishing a state of equal political, economic, and culture and social for women in the United States. I have quoted one of the her name is Showalker. She says that she divided feminists into two types: the feminist critique and genocritiques. The first deals with women as reader, and the second with women as a writer. It is worth here mentioning that to say that sometimes we have writers, I mean female writers, and sometimes we have write about female problems, and we have sometimes male characters writing about female problems also, as the stated true with Ibsen. At the very end, lastly, feminism in the 20th century, we have a very beautiful sentence in which we should, pay attention to this sentence, which is uttered by feminists. They say, or they want actually, they say, let love conquer hate. That is feminism. So they say, they summarize the meaning of feminism in these four words: let love conquer hate. So they are after equal rights between male and female. At the very end, or at the end of my talking, I would like to thank you for yes. At the very end, I want to thank you for listening, for being patient to me, and thank you very much.
Thanks, Mr. Qutaiba, for this valuable presentation. Well, after listening to Mr. Qutaiba, I shall move on to my colleague, Mr. Ahmed Jassim. Nice to have you here, Mr. Ahmed. Mr. Ahmed is an assistant lecturer in English and American novel. These days, he teaches modern, novel, and 16th century poetry at our departments. Nevertheless, his major interests are ecofeminism and environmental studies. For today, he will present feminism in novel, and his presentation covers the feminist theories of both Alice Walker and Bell Hooks, and their applicability in Toni Morrison's novel. The mic is yours, Mr. Ahmed.
Yes, thank you, Ms. Huda. Thank you for the brief introduction. Just let me share my screen. So can you see my screen?
Yes, Ahmed, you can see your screen. Put it again.
Okay. So just a minute.
Yes, now we can see it. You can start now.
Okay. Okay, good evening, everyone. So my part in this symposium, it's like feminism in novel. So I have chosen to talk about feminism in Toni Morrison's novel Paradise. Well, in this presentation, I will go through like a feminist novel, and I will throw the light on Bell Hooks and Alice Walker and their own theories, their own understanding of the term feminism and womanism. Then I will try to analyze Morrison's novel Paradise, like from feminist perspective analysis. Also, I will find out like womanism in this novel, the premises in Paradise novel. Then I will end my presentation with a brief conclusion. Well, let me give applying like two different beliefs of two different famous writers. Their main concern is like women studies, feminism. They are Hooks and Alice Walker. So those both writers, they try to give like the concept of a Black feminism and womanism in modern literature. So I would try to find out like how the wise and strong women in Toni Morrison's novel Paradise, they are strong enough to recreate their own themselves as subjects and to promote their own unique identity in a male-dominated society. Well, feminist novel, I just want to note on this, like not every novel that concerns itself with the lives of women is a feminist novel. Well, we may say like there's like many novels, they like they discuss like many things or many issues regarding to women. We may see like the protagonist or the main characters are female, but still they have like nothing to do with feminism. And to understand like the feminist novel, first we have to find out or to understand like what's feminism, what's like the waves of feminism, what's the premises. And Ms. Huda, she has like discussed at the very beginning of this presentation all these things, so it may help to understand like the feminist novel. Well, Black feminist thoughts. Well, here both like Bell Hooks and Alice Walker, they both agree like in order to place a Black woman at the center of stories about the American past, they must be depicted as subjects, that is as a creative change agent rather than as a passive objects. And this could be like the main aims of feminism in literature. Morrison's novel shows like how Black women don't accept to be forced to adapt into a typical white or Black patriarchal standard or a male-dominated society. I will go through this in my presentation. Well, let me just give a quick introduction to Bell Hooks. She's like a Black feminist thinker. She is a novelist. She is famous for like main themes of her novel. It's like supporting the Black woman or the female characters in her novel. Most of her novel, they try to create their own environment. And we may see like a Paradise novel also, and they may have like the same theme. Well, Bell Hooks believes that Black feminism are social thinkers who are able to rise above their own experience and to challenge the Black woman with a new view of oppression and Black female identity, a view that has the possibility of changing the world. This is also the aim or the goal of feminist writer. Also, she claims that until now, like the Black women have been silent under unjust charge of white men and women against them, especially when they talk about like when we read the novels, most of the novels that talk about feminism, we see like there is unequal treatment to the female characters. Also, she claims that it's the right time for the writer or female writer to write about feminism, to find out what the real like feminism in the novel. So they want to tell the world like we don't want to be superior to the man, but we need at least to be like equal to the man. We have to be in a treatment equally, and this is like also the main aim of feminism. Well, Alice Walker, also she's like a Black feminist thinker. She's very famous for her novel, The Color Purple, and she tried to support women through like the literary works. She coined the term womanism, and we see like the term womanism in Paradise novel is very clear. Well, Alice Walker coined the term womanism to describe a courageous woman who lived like most of those courageous women we see like in the novels. For example, Toni Morrison's novel, most of the characters considered to be as a courageous woman who decided to make their own environment, to create their own community, to break the rules of, let's say, patriarchal society. And we will discuss this further in this novel. She defines a womanist as a woman who loves being a woman and enjoys the company of other women. It refers to a woman who prefers women's culture and a woman who is committed to the wholeness of an entire people, male and female. Also, this could be very clear in the novel. Well, I have chosen to talk about Toni Morrison's because we may see like this both terms for like Black feminism and womanism could be presented or could be reflected in Morrison's novel Paradise. Let me just give you a quick introduction about Paradise. Well, Paradise novel shows like the woman has accomplished a meaningful agency by rejecting the rules of dominant. Ruby here, it means the place or the city those women they used to live in. And how they stand against the Black patriarchal culture. In other words, it shows like how the African American female identity could be reconstructed through Black feminist or womanistic recourse to its own culture heritage, and by searching of somewhere to rest and to call home is dominant. Well, also Paradise shows like the Black woman don't accept to be forced to adapt into a typical white or Black patriarchal standards. Morrison novel also we may see like women have decided to make their own decision, have learned to empower themselves without like needing to adhere a male or patriarchal control or to get rid of a male-dominated society. Well, the main reason of revolting against the male-dominated society in this novel, we may see like the Black woman in different aspects. There is a kind of subjectivity, or there is a kind of oppression against the woman in this society. Then they decided to move to revolt against all these traditional standards, let's say. Well, also, it could be clear, like in Morrison novel, the women never stay passive about the discrimination they face, speak with confidence, what can be done to improve their life. Also, we can say they are not that brainwashed women, or they're not brainwashed by the U.S. patriarchal society and the racist social system. And this is why they accomplish, or they wanted to stand or to establish their own community. Well, as been discussed, like the term womanism that been coined by Alice Walker, where we can see this term in the novel, where we can find out like the womanism in the novel. So Alice Walker's concept of womanism could be presented in Morrison novel. So the convent women are courageous enough to make their own wishes and decisions. They start to live their own life. It's interesting to note that the women have their own road. So if you see here, it was like women who walked this road, never men. So they want to prove their identity. They want to tell the world like, this is like our voice and we want to do something. We want to be changed from like an object to subject. Also, we see like the women or the female characters in the novel are not afraid to break the rules and to take risks. That is difficult for a Black woman to recreate their own identity, especially in a male-dominated society. Well, feminist premises, this is something very clear in Morrison's novel, Paradise. Well, according to this novel, so we may see like most of the characters in this novel, they know like the feminist supremacists that happiness and power come to the women who learn to beat men at their own game. So they express their radical Black female subjectivity by facing the ideal representation of their sexuality as though they must suffer and they succeed in making the oppositional side or the oppositional space where their sexuality can be named and represented, where they are not sexual object. When someone's trying to read the novel, you may see the woman, rather than remaining passive, rather than staying home about like discrimination they face, they speak with confidence. So what can do to improve their lives? They are not brainwashed by the male-dominated society and racist social system, and this is why they accomplish in overthrowing the system in their community. Let me just conclude, like, what's the main theme, the main idea of Paradise? Paradise shows like the need of a community to find a common meaning in spite of the diversity of the people forming it in order to protect its most unprotected members. And the convent women strongly believe the common meaning could be that freedom for both men and women can only be achieved when the society has no racial and gender discrimination. And this is like the main message or the main theme behind Toni Morrison's Paradise, and also one of the feminism goals they wanted to achieve in their literary works. Thank you very much, and if you guys have like any question, we can discuss it after the next presentation. Thank you very much.
Well, many thanks, Mr. Ahmed, for your precious contribution. Now, after exploring the feminist theories and premises in both drama and novel, Dr. Saleh Abdullah Abdulrahman will examine them in poetry. Glad to have you with us, Dr. Saleh. Firstly, Dr. Saleh is lecturer in English literature and modern poetry. He teaches poetry at the Department of English, and his major research interest is writing about ethnic and multicultural poetry. Besides, his contributions extend to include participations in 4 conferences, 3 symposiums, and 4 workshops. Nevertheless, for this symposium, as I have said, Dr. Saleh is going to present feminism in poetry. And his presentation will explore feminism in both the Victorian and modern poetry through the works of Robert Browning and Anne Sexton. The floor is yours, Dr. Saleh. You can start your presentation.
Thank you very much, Ms. Huda, for your nice words, and good evening to everyone, my colleagues and attendants. My presentation will be Feminism in Poetry. I'll try to talk about the concept or the development of the concept of feminism in the poetry, concentrating on the Victorian age, moving on towards the 20th century. In fact, I believe that the real beginning of feminism would start late in the 19th century. We can find actually roots of feminism from the Elizabethan time and on, but they were very weak actually roots because of the social, cultural, and religious restrictions that were imposed on women in that time. Even in the Victorian age, such kind of restrictions were still there, but by the end of the 19th century, by the late Victorian age, such kind of restrictions started to loosen, and women started to be more expressive about themselves. So I will try to cover this kind of development throughout my presentation. We will start with a brief introduction to the meaning of feminism. So feminism is the political theory and a practice that struggles to free all women, which means women of color, working class women, poor women, disabled women, as well as white women, from the oppressions of their society. It's a kind of a huge concept. It's just like a very big umbrella. Under this umbrella, all kinds of different types of women are to be there. So black women are going to struggle against the color of their skin as being black, as being a minority group, and also to defend herself as being a female, a woman in a male-dominated society. This definition means that there is not one broad category of women. There are many categories of women who face different problems. So feminism, therefore, should be concerned with oppressions based on sex, race, ability, class, and so on. A black woman, as I just said, cannot separate the color of her skin and her sex. She must cope with different problems compared to a white woman. Now we move to talk about the women, the situation of women in the Victorian age. During the Victorian age, women faced many grievances, among which are the following. Some examples of the grievances that women used to face in the Victorian age. From a legal point of view, women were incompetent and irresponsible. This kind of thing is to be found in the law, the legal point of view. They were totally dependent upon their husbands and subject to them with no rights to sue for divorce or take custody of their children. So a woman in the Victorian age would move from the control of her family parents into the control, to full control of their husbands. The concept of separate spheres are presented or was presented in the Victorian age. These spheres were the public for the men and the private for women. So women should be kept at home, denied even the basic rights of life, that is education and real participation in society. Victorian women were deprived of property rights. They were prevented of handling any property, and everything they owned would go by marriage to their husbands. So everything that a woman owed at that time would go by marriage to her husband, even her surname. So in that time, the surname was obligatory. A woman should take the surname of her husband. I think nowadays she can choose. She's free to take, to keep either her surname or to take that of her husband. Another problem of the Victorian woman, which was also economic, was the problem of prostitution and middle-class women. Now, bad working conditions and unemployment pushed thousands of women into prostitution, which became increasingly professionalized in the 19th century. The only other occupation which an unmarried woman could have was to be a governess. In fact, economy was one of the crucial problems for women at that time. The dependence of women upon their husbands, upon other persons, was because of economic. They want to earn their living, and there were no other ways except by either having a husband to depend on him or to go out and work as a prostitute. The only other choice that a woman can have is to be a governess. A governess is a single unmarried woman who works in someone else's house, and the man or the husband or the owner of that house is going to control her life. So that man is going to be just like the society oppressing that governess. She cannot even get married without the permission of her the owner of the man or employer, the man whom she is working for. The development of feminism. In this presentation, discuss how feminism got more support and encouragement from the Victorian age to the modern and contemporary times. By comparing literary works from the 19th and 20th century, one can notice the development of feminism thoughts through the passage of time. Now, some aspects of this development are as follows. Feminism thoughts are getting stronger by the progression of time. And this is basically due to the changes in the society, the social and cultural changes that happened at the end of the 19th century and the beginning of the 20th century. Especially, I think the most crucial factor is the loosening of the religious restrictions, especially after the First World War. The second phase of development, feminism thoughts always oppose gender inequality, as both are always found as binary oppositions in literary works. Feminism thoughts live through human values and repetitive actions. And finally, personal and familial values are crucial in order to develop feminism thoughts. The image of women in poetry. The image of women in the Victorian poetry is constructed from male vantage points, which the speaker actually speaks for the female. So they were not able to express themselves, to speak for themselves, but we have a man speaking on behalf of women, describing them, talking about their conditions. Even when a female voice appears, it is significant only insofar that she represents for the poet a mirror of his former self. So she reflects his past life. So he talks about her. The image of a silent woman is a characteristic feature of the Victorian poetry. And in fact, most of the poems written in the Victorian time depicted women as silent. They were not given the right to express themselves. But of course, this is a kind of a literary technique. So when the poet describes a woman or depicted a woman as a silent woman, he is not against that woman, but in fact, he is supporting the woman. But throughout this literary trick, by depicting her, by portraying that woman as helpless, as inexpressive, she cannot have the ability to express herself, as obedient to the patriarchal society. And this we can see in the poetry of Robert Browning. It's very clear in the poetry of Robert Browning. It also contributes to the image of the ideal Victorian woman. Now, in the Victorian society, they spread a kind of the image of an ideal woman. That ideal woman is obedient, is helpless, is silent, the woman who obeys everyone who controls her life. She's a very passive woman without any kind of personal characteristics. So the image of a good woman is spread, and this kind of images supports that image or that ideal Victorian woman who is good for nothing except an obedient, silent, and helpless housewife. This image of a woman is reflected in the dramatic monologues of Robert Browning. The first poem I'm going to talk about briefly, actually, is My Last Duchess, because it's a well-known poem of Robert Browning. In My Last Duchess, Robert Browning portrays an image of the Victorian woman as a silent, helpless, and oppressed woman. The Duchess is only described through the eyes and words of the Duke. This is the Duke describing the Duchess to the voyager who was supposed to negotiate the marriage of the Duke. She had a heart, how shall I say, too soon made glad, too easily impressed. She liked whatever she looked on, and her looks went everywhere. Now, in these lines, the Duke is describing the Duchess. Actually, without him being aware of what she's doing, he's praising her. But for him, he was actually criticizing her behavior. She's a very simple woman. She's well liked by everyone. She's a humble woman that would be satisfied with everything. But because he's an arrogant person, very proud of himself, these kind of features are negative, are passive for him. So she's a very kind and simple woman who is easily made happy. She doesn't have the arrogance of the Duke. And this is why she is loved by everyone. The poet goes on depicting the image of the silent woman who is denied even the right of expressing or defending herself. She smiled, the Duke says, she smiled, no doubt, whenever I passed her. But who passed without much the same smile? This grew, I have commands, then all smiles stopped together. As the woman gets more attention than the Duke and seems to overshadow the arrogant Duke, he gives commands and she is silent forever. Now, because that woman is well loved by her community, is actually having a kind of power that he is unable to control, because everything in the castle, in the life of the Duke, including his wife, should be under the direct control of the Duke. But he seems to not have control over the behavior of his wife. He wanted her to be just like him, to be disliked, to be hated, to be arrogant. But the power of the female, as reflected by Robert Browning in this poem, the power of the female is her kindness, her tenderness, her simple behavior to everyone around her. So the power is not having muscles or money, but the power in being loved or well loved by everyone. He fails to control the behavior or to convince her to stop going on such kind of behavior, so he ordered her to be killed. And this is the only one he can control her with. After killing her, he hanged her portrait on the wall, and this portrait is covered by a curtain, and the Duke himself would decide, would choose who can see the portrait of this Duchess. So after her death, he manages to control her, because even he covered her portrait with a curtain, and he can choose whom to show the portrait for. The other poem by Robert Browning is Porphyria's Lover. In this poem, Browning satirizes the Victorian convention that the woman would always be the possessed object. But as it turns out, it is the man who is passive in this poem, sitting, waiting for her in a cottage and watching her actions drive the narrative while he is in it. Now, even the title of the poem, here we can see a kind of a change in the technique. Even the title of the poem is after the name of the female character. So the man here is not known. It is Porphyria's lover. He is subordinated. She takes control in this poem. This is how the poem starts. The rain set early in tonight. The sullen wind was soon awake when glided in Porphyria. Straight she shut the cold out on the stone, and kneeled and made the chillest grate blaze up and all the cottage warm. Now this lover, this man, is living actually for one reason only, which is waiting for Porphyria and possessing her, owning her. He was sitting in his cottage in a very bad, rainy, cold weather without even setting fire in the fireplace. He was sitting by the door was open, so the outside atmosphere is linked with the inside atmosphere, with the inside of the house or the cottage. When Porphyria comes in, she immediately shuts the cold out. She makes a kind of a boundary between the outside atmosphere and the inside one. So she's depicted here as a very active, full of life woman. She shut the cold out and the storm, making a kind of a barrier, and sorry, and kneeled and made the cheerless grate blaze up. She sets fire in the fireplace and warmed the cottage. A warmness here is a symbol of love, of activity, and of life. But but that lover actually is a kind of a very passive lover, and Porphyria ends in much the same way as the Duchess. She was killed by her lover because this is the only way he can control her or he can own her. These two poems are examples of the poetry of the Victorian age, how they depicted the image of women in the Victorian age. If we move to the modern age, Anne Sexton, we have Anne Sexton. Anne Sexton, in fact, belongs to the second half of the 20th century. She is a confessional poet. Confessional poetry, as some of you would know, is a very subjective poetry. The poet talks about the private details of his life and uses them as the raw material of his poetry. Now, Anne Sexton here is very brave and courageous to use the tiny details of her being a woman. And she talks about things that cannot be said in public, and she uses them in the poetry. Now, because she lives at the second half of the 20th century, and as we said, the social restriction started to loosen, the religious restriction started to loosen very much. So Anne Sexton was able to talk about her hungers for sex, for example, her hungers for desires. She wanted her desires to be fulfilled, and she asked that man, invite him to come to her and fulfill. These kind of taboos were not allowed before the 20th century. So Anne Sexton violates the Victorian tradition of representing women as silent, obedient, and helpless. She writes about subjects that are considered taboos even to the people of the 20th century. She writes about sex, her hunger for success, and personal identity. And to conclude, I think the major development that happened started from the Victorian age, when we have poets, male poets like Tennyson and like Robert Browning, talking and depicting women as helpless and silent and unable to control themselves. But at the same time, they were very powerful women. Powerful not in having authority, because the authority is in the hands of men in the patriarchal society, but they are very powerful in being very active in society, in their communities. So the roots actually started in the Victorian age, and they started to develop. By the passage of time, when such kind of restrictions, the social, cultural, and religious restrictions started to loosen, women would have more freedom in expressing themselves and not to be silent anymore. Thank you for your listening and for your attention. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Saleh, for this work presentation. God bless you with Dr. Qutaiba and Mr. Ahmed. Now, our guest, after giving an introduction to feminism in literature, history, and theory, and applying the premises of feminist literary criticism to drama, novel, and poetry, we gladly can receive your questions. So, do you have any questions?
Yes, Miss Huda. May I start?
Yes, Doctor. Yeah, Dr. Bassem. Yeah, you can start.
Well, good evening, everybody. Congratulations, my dear colleague, for this informative and interesting symposium. You have done well. I understand feminism as a relatively Western construct, which represents advocacy of women's rights on the ground of equality of sexes. You know that it is affected by culture and ideology of the writer. It calls for political, economic, and social equality of sexes. Now, in fact, I have two questions to the contributors. The first question is feminism culture bound or universal? This is my first question. My second question is, to what extent is this Western construct or trend applicable to our society, especially to our Arabic literary heritage? Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much, Dr. Bassem.
By all means, yes.
So, would you, my colleague, answer his questions? Would you like to answer his question?
I may answer like
Mr.
the first
Ahmed?
question. Yes, please.
Yes, I can answer that. Yes, Mr. Ahmed, go on.
Excuse me, Sutuda, I can't hear the very clear. The voice is not so clear with me.
It's okay, Mr. Qutaiba.
Well, so the first question
of Professor Baqsm.
Yes, please.
Yes, Mr. Ahmed.
Yeah, so you have said like it's either like a universal.
I can't hear you.
Mr. Qutaiba, would you like me to repeat the questions?
Mr. Baqsm, or?
Yes. Would you like me to repeat the questions?
دكتور باسم الخلل من يم استاذ قتيبة فاحنا لازم نستمر يعني.
Okay, go ahead.
من يمك استاذ قتيبة هذا الخلل من النت.
Yes. Who wants to answer my question? Any one of the contributors? Yes, Mr. Ahmed.
Mr. Ahmed.
Yes, sorry, Doctor. So the first question you said like it's either like a universal or it's a cultural one. So I think it's like a universal one, and it's affected like our culture. It's affected our society.
Yes, but to what extent is this construct be applicable to our society and especially to our Arabic literary heritage? Is it applicable to our literary heritage?
Well, it's applicable, but you know, like it's our society. It's somehow, let's say, there is a kind of restriction. So I don't think so. It's too like it's not that much like applicable to our society. But still, we see like there is many like feminist movement is going on in our society.
Sorry, Ustad Ahmed. Dr. Baqsm.
Yes, please.
Can you hear me?
I could answer like your question.
Yeah. Dr. Baqsm.
Yes, please. Yes, Mr. Qutaiba.
Mr.
Ahmed. You have answered. I just want to say something with Dr. Baqsm. Do you want to know that whether in our society, because here we are talking about feminism in literature.
Yes, of course, yes.
Feminism is not implied in literature. Feminism is found everywhere. It's social, political, but here, this symposium we are concentrating on using the term or this definition of feminism in literature.
Yes. I see, yes. For example, what you have said now, to what extent that what you have said is applicable to, for example, the novels of أحلام مستغانمي, for example, أحلام مستغانمي, نوال السعداوي, جوز طرابيشي, غرب الذكور وأنوثة, الشرق والغرب. To what extent are these constructs or these trends applicable to such novels, for example?
Yeah, Dr. Baqsm, you know that there is, we cannot say a difference, but actually the atmosphere in Europe or Indian writers is a little bit different from our Arabic writers. And accordingly, it's not difficult, if not impossible, to find such a freedom characters, whether they are using their female characters or male characters, but mainly here in our society, in our literature, in Arabic literature, the voice of women is less that found in Europe, and this is true.
Sure,
this is a fact. This is fact. We cannot deny that.
It is.
But
so it is culture bound.
It is
culture bound rather than universal.
Yes, it is. You can apply. We can apply feminism, or feminism can be applied in our literature, in Arabic literature, because we have so many of the poets. We have women writers, novelists. We have dramatists. But actually, it is not the case, or it's not the same thing with which happens in Europe. Because of this, the difference between the two societies, the European societies and the Arabic societies.
Yes. Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Qutayba.
If I may say
Thank you very
something,
much, Mr.
if I may
Qutayba.
say something to Dr. Basim. I think the concept is,
yes,
yes, the concept of feminism is universal. The application of that concept is cultural bound. Because I think I have mentioned this in my presentation.
Yes, yes.
Feminism
Yes,
in the
exactly.
feminism in the Victorian age, it really started in the Victorian age or before that, but it was very slight. Yeah, the effects of that movement of feminism was not so effective because religion was controlling everything at that time, society and culture, and each one of them reflects the other. But in the modern age, when religion, this is my own opinion, when religion started to weaken, especially after the First World War, women started to gain rights, more rights, even the sexual rights, the sexual freedom, I mean. They never, they don't apply now by any kind of social restrictions or religious constriction or cultural restriction. This is not applicable in our societies, especially the Arab and Islamic societies, because here religion is very strong. Here people abides by religion, and the concepts of feminism, the Western version of feminism cannot be applied here. We have writers, feminist writers, who actually wrote very good feminist novels. I have read some of them. They were treating the helplessness or the passiveness of the situation of women in our society. They are controlled from the very beginning of their lives, and even after marriage they are controlled by their husbands. But they are trying to modify the Western version with an Eastern one, the one that can be applicable. They start with the basics, for example, education, and to have a job, to have an occupation, then to be equal with the man after marriage, like by not by all the rights actually, but not to be just like Amina and Susaid, not that to be very obedient, yes, and passive. So it is culturally
now, Mr.
bound.
Saleh, sorry for interruption. So do you agree with me that this construct or this concept, let us say, in fact, it is a construct, not a concept. Yes. Is this construct culturally and ideologically loaded?
Yes, I agree with you.
Yes,
I totally agree with you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, thank you. I think also no one answered Dr. Baqsim. Dr. Baqsim's question about whether feminism is yes, culturally bounded. Yes, it is cultural bound issue. It is cultural bound subject, cultural bound, because every culture has its own, its own environment, its own circumstances, history, personality, religion, everything can be studied alone. Like when he gave you a subject about أحلام مستغنمي, like عابر سرير. Her one of her novels, عابر سرير. It's full of feminism, right? And there is also the Egyptian Nawal Saadawi. She's more feminist than even like American, like for instance Alice Walker or other feminists. Yeah, thank you so much. You did very well. I enjoyed it. All the best for all of you, inshallah.
Thank you. We are thanking you also for your...
Are there any time for questions?
Thank you, Dr. Wafa.
Yes, Dr. Huda Fadel.
Hello?
Do you have any question?
Yes, can I ask a question? Do you still have time?
Hello? Yeah. Who is talking with us? Yeah, Doctor. Yeah, Dr. Huda.
I am a student. In the translation department. I don't study at your department, sadly, but if you excuse me, can I ask a question to everybody?
Yeah, you can ask.
So I am currently doing a research on this subject on feminism. I am supposed to write a paper, and This has been a shock to see that we have such topic discussed in our city, in Mosul in particular, and to hear you guys talk about it and discuss it is actually amazing. So I could really use your answers to include in my research. The question is, how would you perceive a young woman or a woman in our society who comes to you and says that she is a feminist? That's the first question. Like, I want to see your opinions. Like, how would you look at that girl and what are your opinions about her? The second question would be, do you think that feminism and Islam can go together?
Yeah, anyone wants to answer the question of Zainab?
Yes,
Saturi, I can answer that.
Yeah, Doctor.
Yes, please, Mr. Qutayba, you can start.
Yeah, you can start.
Yes, Dr. Farah. She is saying whether, I mean, is there any with the feminism and Islam? Okay. This is the second question, or the second question of the young lady. As we know that feminism, whether it is, I mean, especially she said that connected to Islam, if feminism is governed by Islamic rules, then there is no harm in that. But if these rules violate the Islamic rules, then it's not accepted, or it's not. I mean, you know, for our, because we have so many differences we have differences in different religions. So this is the idea. You may find feminism in Islam is different from feminism in Christianity, for example. Okay. So if it is this feminism, or the behavior, if a lady says that I am a feminist, which is rules or governed by Islamic rules or principles, then it is, we have so many of the Islamic feminist characters and feminist writers, and they are well, and we have novelists, we have some of them, they wrote poetry and novel. So there is nothing in harm in that. But if they violate, or they give, to violate the Islamic principles or rules, then I think it is something which is not acceptable. This is my own idea. I don't know whether, because your question is a very personal question. It's not an academic one. Thank you very much, Saduda.
Yes, if I may answer you.
I apologize. My question is based on a research that I'm doing, and this was one of the questions that I'm supposed to answer. That's why I thought I would ask it here. Yeah,
it's okay. It's okay. You only ask a question. Now, I think both of your questions are related. My reaction, or what I would have said to a woman who come to me saying that she's a feminist, I don't think that you are asking me as an individual, but you're asking me as a part of a community. So I think being an individual in Islamic Arabic country is the same as does feminism go with Islam or not. So both the questions are related because they are bounded by culture, society, and religion, right? The Western version of feminism is not applicable in any Islamic country, right? Because, as I said, I think in my presentation, I said that in the Western world, in America and the rest of Europe, feminism only succeeded and women started gaining so much rights that they never dreamed of in the Victorian age, only because the huge changes in the culture and in the society and in religion. Because religion in the modern age, as you know, retreated. Some people now do not believe even in the existence of God. So take any Christian, a strict Christian, he doesn't believe in most of the feminist thoughts that are available in Europe. That the Europe people are exercising them. But because of the retreat of religion, we can see that all the feminism thoughts are very spread in there. However, if we can find, if the feminist people in our society, in the Islamic society, can work for an Eastern version of feminism, this can go with Islam. Only this can go with Islam. But in Islam, a woman cannot live with a man as boyfriend and girlfriend without getting married. This is not applicable. You cannot go out without wearing scarf, hijab, right? This is against Islam, and this is part of the rights of women in Europe, right? So here, because religion is very strong, it governs everything, all details of our life. So the Western version of feminism is not applicable here in our society. I hope I have answered you.
You did very thoroughly, did. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Saleh. Yes, Dr. Huda, do you have any question?
Okay, good evening, everyone.
Dr. Huda? Good evening.
Hello, are you hearing me well?
Yeah, your voice so clear.
Okay. I would like to thank you all and congratulate you all for this nice presentations. Actually, you are as a group approved to be a good group in providing us, enriching us with new ideas about literature and this concept, or as Dr. Baqsem called it, the construct in literature, I mean, feminism. I would like to thank Dr. Baqsem, the head of the department, as well, for giving us such a chance talking and chatting academically during night under these uncertain times, being suffering or whatsoever, what do we call it, after the COVID-19 pandemic.
Yeah.
I
We are under pressure.
Thank you. I don't have any question, but I would like to comment on Dr. Baqsem's, one of Dr. Baqsem's questions that was about whether we regard feminism, whether or we should think about feminism as a culturally oriented concept or not. I was listening to Dr. Saleh's answer, and I think Mr. Ahmed's answer as well. They have two different viewpoints or two different answers answering Dr. Baqsem's question. Well, I think, according to my point of view, this is a very big question. We cannot answer it by saying that a yes, a resounding yes, saying that it is culturally oriented or not. I think it could be a good title for an article. I mean, this exact question: could we consider, or can we consider feminism as culturally oriented or not? We can write articles about this. I was thinking about the writers, Arab writers, Egyptian writers, for example, Najib Mahfouz, Ihsan Abdul Quddus. Though they are male writers, but still I can read their thoughts about feminism and the way the Arab women is suffering or has been suffering a lot since long time at their times when writing their novels. I do believe in some ways there are issues shared by all women in the world. So in this case, it is universal. But in some other cases, there are certain issues which are culturally oriented. These are combined to a woman in one particular community or society. So I was motivated actually to think about this question and maybe we can share works or writing articles about this. I mean, teachers from the two specialties, linguistics and literature. The other point I do like to raise is that feminism is not only in literature. When Dr. Baqsem talked about the session we are planning to have, I was thinking about, or I was combining the term or the concept feminism with some other synonyms which I could find in part of the literature related to my PhD dissertation. I have a brief article or paper which I participated, which I actually presented in a conference, an international conference 2 years back. Its title is as follows. It's a girl, says the doctor. Sexism as a face of women avoidance in Japanese textbooks of English education. Here I talked about a writer, a Japanese writer, who made actually a sort of statistical package about the way or the ways women actually is being inferior in English or Japanese textbooks of English education. And here he combined he talked about terms like gender bias, gender imbalance, sexism, gender inequity. I do believe that these synonyms are in a way or another related to what are you talking about, feminism. So I have a recommendation actually. Why don't we think about having a project, let me say, a book maybe, where we could write chapters or articles, and we have editor. We're going to have an editor for this book, and here we can talk about these issues of feminism in different areas or genres in literature, and combine or analyze these issues linguistically speaking. I do believe we're going to have, we're going to cut actually those issues of superiority and inferiority by having male and female writers, among the staff member, and we could work about, or we could work on this book or this project in terms of chapters or units, and I do believe we're going to have a very great job. And since I'm talking these days with reputed publishing houses, I do believe they would like to have such a project or such a book actually to publish in an international publishing house. Thank you again, dear colleagues, for giving us these hours actually to listen to some literature, some issues about feminism, and I do like to share other sessions talking about relevant issues. I mean, we can share.
Thank you very much, Dr. Huda. Thank you very much.
Talking about these issues linguistically and literary from two different aspects or perspectives. I mean, linguistically and literary. Thank you again.
Thank you very much, Dr. Huda.
You're welcome.
Thank you very much, Dr. Huda. Now we reach to the end of our symposium today. So I want to thank everyone for holding, attending, and participating in such an amazing scientific event, challenging the lockdown and the bad extraordinary circumstances represented by COVID-19 pandemic. Thank you very much to all of you, and have a nice night.